I have a lot of things I want to get off my chest.
This is The Pencil, a professional wrestling podcast starring Renny D and friends. Thanks for listening to The Pencil. Subscribe to the show on iTunes and follow us on Twitter at Pencil Podcast.
This is weird. It's a Thursday, and we're coming at you with another edition of The Pencil. It's the professional wrestling podcast. Normally we come at you every Tuesday, but because our guest was so fascinating this week, we turned into 2 episodes for a Tuesday-Thursday broadcast. But good thing that we did, Dirt, because Survivor Series is Sunday. We just spent our podcast on Tuesday ripping apart Monday Night Raw like crazy, not really emotionally invested in the show on Sunday, and then boom, we're hit with some news today from the tapings that happened last night for SmackDown. Do you want to tell our listeners, and before you do, this is a spoiler alert, people, so if you don't want to know what happens tomorrow night on SmackDown, if you're listening on Thursday, you're going to want to fast forward here a little bit, because we're going to fill you in on some news and some information that changes the overall perception of the card on Sunday. I said my piece. If you listen to this and you're mad at us, it's your own damn fault. Dirt, take it away, man. Fill us in on what's going on in the world of pro wrestling, and specifically the WWE.
SmackDown spoilers this week. We heard via the internet. Obviously, it was taped on Tuesday night, and the main event, which we took a lot of Tuesday's show this week to discuss, with the 5-on-5 traditional Survivor Series tag team match, elimination tag team match. Now, instead of it just being a stipulation where the Authority will be out of power if they lose, there was an added stipulation that was added on Friday Night SmackDown, which will air tomorrow night, that will say if Team Cena loses, every member of Team Cena will be fired from the WWE. Take that for what you will. I know whenever I read it, I was surprised. I wanted to ask your take on it, Ryan. What is more surprising, the fact that the stipulation happened, or the fact that they announced it on SmackDown?
To me, I'm more surprised that the stipulation was announced. I could care less which show it was announced on. I think that they're trying to make a effort to promote SmackDown to be basically a 1A show compared to the show on Mondays, specifically because SmackDown's moving back to Thursday nights starting in January. So they want to get some information out on SmackDown, and I'm glad that they did it, because now I'm more invested in that main event than I was on Tuesday, when we talked on Tuesday. I'm confused, I guess, though, because you and I both made our picks on Monday, and I'm going to stick, I think, with what I made for picks. But you have a scenario in mind that I found was rather unique, and you mentioned it to me today. I'm not sure if you changed your tune over the course of the afternoon, if you're still sticking with what you kind of thought and what you told me. Where are you sitting now with the finish to Team Authority, Team Cena with the new stipulation?
On Tuesday's show, I said I thought the Authority would win and that it only made sense for the Authority to win. I still say that is what makes the most sense. After hearing today what I heard, and with regards to how big we thought Survivor Series was going to be 4 weeks ago and how bad the buildup has been, I feel like it would give it some sort of justice if something happened with John Cena's character at Survivor Series that completely turned fans to say, oh my goodness, this is going to be a new era of WWE. It's not going to be the same old Cena overcome situation. And then they'll be buying the WWE Network going forward. In what way to force somebody that's on the fence to buy the WWE Network than to have John Cena, quote unquote, semi-heel turn, maybe not full bore, but be the reason that his team loses, and then cost 4 other guys their job and come out on Monday and not feel bad about it. Something to that effect would not shock me. Either way, I still stick with the Authority winning, but the added stipulation gives me the idea that if everybody's getting fired and John Cena does something to cause his team to lose, to maybe save his own job, that kind of thing, and the other 4 guys then are out of a job, the added storyline there would be intriguing, I think.
Yeah, I think it would be cool to see that, and I think people that are watching it for the first time for free are like, holy shit, we need to buy this network now because this is a whole new era. I get exactly where you're coming from. I can't see it happening for, I guess, one reason is he's facing Brock Lesnar soon, and Lesnar is the quote-unquote heel. Unless they're just going to throw everything out the window and let Lesnar be an ass kicker since he's been getting cheered anyway, I don't know. One thing that I mentioned on Tuesday was a Dolph Ziggler heel turn. Well, if Dolph Ziggler cost Team Cena their match and to save his job, it doesn't necessarily make sense to me now because what title would Dolph Ziggler go after? I mean, he would be gifted with some sort of reward for helping Team Authority win, one would think. They're not going to give him a rematch with Luke Harper because Luke Harper's part of Team Authority. Rusev has the U.S. title. He's part of Team Authority. So I might be changing my tune a little bit here on Dolph Ziggler turning heel because I don't see the benefit other than the fact of him being a heel, but then who's he go after? The top star in the company? He wants to take down John Cena. He wants to be the face of the WWE. That is the only thing that I could see for him turning a heel because he's not getting a title shot anytime soon. I don't know, man. This whole thing throws a different wrench into the situation. I would imagine with it being in St. Louis that we're going to get a Randy Orton sighting somehow. I don't know. I mean, I'm going to stick with my pick, and I'm going to stick with my Dolph Ziggler turning heel. I don't know if it's going to happen anymore, but I'm a man of my word. I'm going to stick to it.
I'm sticking with the Authority too. I wouldn't put out of the question a situation where Sheamus returns to cost Team Cena the match to get all those guys fired, because Sheamus has that in the back of his head where I think anybody that watches wrestling would prefer something to change with Sheamus's character. I don't believe he's actually hurt. I think he was written out of the match for a reason. So if we saw Sheamus return in some capacity to cost Team Cena the match, and his reasoning being, I just got my ass kicked for 3 weeks in a row while I was going to be on this team and nobody was there to have my back, that kind of thing I could see happening as well. So one way or another, I'm sticking with Team Authority, but the added stipulation definitely makes me feel like whatever's coming up tomorrow night on SmackDown might be the version that we wish we would have gotten on Monday Night Raw that we were so disappointed about earlier this week.
Yeah, and I'm imagining as well, because I would think Sheamus's character has been stale, and if you turn him heel, it would make total sense, and then to have him go against John Cena to build John Cena back up as the face and as a good guy, I believe that the audience is more frustrated cheering for Sheamus than they are for John Cena, and that might be going on a limb. I'm the type of guy who doesn't buy in the Sheamus and the Irish gimmick as much as some. I would have, if I'm invested in the product, I guess I would prefer to boo Sheamus over John Cena. That would be a different program for them to go. Basically, Cena going through a big man Sheamus to get the Lesnar. There's so many different thoughts that we could throw at the wall, and one of them might stick, but we're not creative. We're not the one making those decisions, and we'll find out. I'm going to watch SmackDown, even though I know it's going to happen now. I'm interested to see how it plays out from their standpoint. I'm going to be watching the show on Sunday, obviously, begrudgingly watching some of the matches that I don't really care about. But one final thought, too. Outside the main event, the more and more I think about it, the more and more I think that four-man or four-way tag team title match is going to be really good. For some reason, I just think that with Goldust in there and the Usos, they're very good. And Los Matadors, as much as they're kind of a joke on TV, they're very good wrestlers. And I'm a huge fan of Miz and Mizdow. So I think that match is actually going to be very entertaining and very good. And it potentially might be the best match of the show. It really could, in my opinion. With the 5 matches that are listed right now, if you had to pick the match that you think is going to steal the show, which isn't much of a show to steal, which one are you taking?
If we're taking out the main event, I would probably lean toward the tag team match too. I think I would agree with you. I'm just not invested, and I don't think that the Wyatt versus Dean Ambrose match has been built in any sort of capacity. And obviously they could have used SmackDown for that, it sounds like to me. I mean, they chose to then make SmackDown tomorrow night even more about the main event when that's all they did on Monday night. So if they're not going to put the time in to make me interested in Wyatt versus Ambrose, then I'm not going to take the time to care about it. I'll take the tag team match too, and I'm still hoping that Mizdow brings back the belts.
It potentially could happen. And big news today, too, before we let you guys go and before we get into part 2 with Carmine, TNA Wrestling Dirt signs a new contract with a new television promotion, Destination America, part of the Discovery Networks or Discovery Channels. I've never heard of the damn thing before. I Googled or I looked up on the internet today. If I have it, I have ATT Uverse. I don't get the channel. You might have it being with DirecTV. But that's just something for the listeners and for you to keep in mind. After January, you're going to have to start tuning into that channel to watch total nonstop action. But everybody agrees with you, Travis, that TNA has been getting a lot better, and it's been a lot better, and wrestling is better when there's more competition. So the more competition to WWE, the better it is for us as fans. All right, dude.
I believe Alberto Del Rio announced today that he's going to be competing for TNA and Lucha Underground in 2015 too. So he'll be an added talent to both of those.
Yeah, I saw he was he mentioned that he's signing with 2 companies, but last I checked he hadn't said who they were, but then I heard the rumors that it was going to be TNA and Lucha Underground, which makes complete sense. If he can work out a deal that allows him to work in both places, cool. I know Ring of Honor just locked down a deal where their contracted wrestlers aren't allowed to work anywhere else, which kind of sucks because they get to go other places and work indie scenes. So it's a give and take on everything, but whatever it might be, we can call this episode 15.5, episode 16, whatever it is. We just wanted to come at you guys here on Thursday, a little preview for Survivor Series on Sunday with the SmackDown spoilers. Again, if we ruined your day, it's your own problem because you listened and we told you not to if you didn't want to. So Sunday is Survivor Series live on the WWE Network. Dirt and I will be back next Tuesday with David Hero from Pro Wrestling Report to break down all the Survivor Series action. Looking forward to it, Dirt. Good luck this weekend. Go buy my bottle of Southern Comfort. Can't wait to collect in 2 weeks when I see you.
You think you know me?
We are having a great episode, but coming up next is our guest of the evening. You've been listening to The Pencil, a professional wrestling podcast with me, Renny D, and my friends. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes, PodBean, Stitcher, and YouTube. And follow us on Twitter at Pencil Podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for listening to another great edition of The Pencil. It's the Professional Wrestling Podcast. We know you have many options when it comes to wrestling podcasts, so thank you so much for making us part of your day. We strive for something different here at The Pencil. I spent 11 years within the professional wrestling business, going through the motions and the rhythms of being a professional wrestler. We do the best we can to bring you exciting guests each and every week, and in part 1 of my interview with Carmine DeSpirito, we talked about the history of professional wrestling, what it was like for Carmine working the Northeast Independent Territorial System, managing overseas, as well as an interesting story about the Ultimate Warrior holding up a show because he wanted more money. Sounds familiar, right? Well, the ending might actually shock you. Carmine built a legacy in professional wrestling, starting with shooting pictures for Wrestling Eye magazine next to Paul Heyman, into managing, and then eventually he decided to move to Milwaukee, Wisconsin to start his own independent promotion, Mid-American Wrestling. That's where we pick up here in part 2 of my interview with Carmine. We talk about starting Mid-American Wrestling, why he did it, and the trials and tribulations along the way. A big part of him starting Mid-American Wrestling was teaming up with local wrestling promoter in Milwaukee now, the Thumper Frankie DeFalco, and running a show in a church. Part of that show included the first ever barbed wire match in the city of Milwaukee, and it just so happened to be at a church. Interesting, right? Well, it gets better. Carmine is responsible for bringing some of the biggest names in professional wrestling to the Milwaukee area. Names like Colt Cabana, Adam Pearce, Kamikaze Ken Anderson, Austin Aries, and CM Punk. Carmine booked these people on a regular basis. Hear what Carmine has to say about these wrestlers, including some harsh words for CM Punk, but in a good way. Do me a huge favor. Subscribe to us on iTunes, rate, review, and share this with your friends. We're also on YouTube, PodBean, and Stitcher. We have a website, pencilpodcast.com, and we can follow us on Twitter at pencilpodcast. In the meantime, put your feet up, grab a beverage, potentially a whiskey on the rocks, sit back, and enjoy the show. So when did you actually make the adjustment then from the East Coast to the Midwest, and when did Mid-American Wrestling become, an idea?
1993. I visited Milwaukee
I met a guy by the name of the Texas Hangman. I don't know if you remember him.
I don't.
You don't? Well,
no.
Hangman was out of Milwaukee. The Texas Hangman, he was partners with, he became Bull Payne.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
And they rings a bell.
Yeah. His partner was Mike Moran, and I was friends with Mike. I toured with Mike overseas, and he lived in Milwaukee. I came to visit, and I saw this different. It was a different wrestling scene than I was accustomed to. Different than the East Coast. It seemed like there was such an emphasis on wrestling. It was very like what you would think Vern Gagne's AWA would be. At least that's what I thought at the time. The mentality, the emphasis on psychology. The wrestlers were really they were sharp, and they knew how to work. So I decided, why not move? So I moved from Jersey to Milwaukee. I met another wrestler by the name of Frankie DeFalco.
Yes, the Thumper.
Yeah, the Thumper. And we were buddies, and we started promoting wrestling shows. Frankie, known by everybody in town. We'd go out to a local church festival, and every other person is going up to him saying hello. So I said, boy, oh boy, this is the contact that I need. And he was a hell of a wrestler, too. Really, a great worker. For the time. And I had a great start. There were some great guys in the Midwest at the time. Primarily at first, I just used the guys from the Milwaukee area. Later on, I branched out, used guys from Chicago. Once in a while, use a guy from Minnesota, St. Louis. Much later on, I started booking guys out of Kentucky and so on, guys that wrestled for Ian Rotten, I booked. But starting in 1993, I started my first show. It was, I want to say July of 93. Well, that was my second show. And I had Baron Von Raschke on it.
The Claw. I love Baron. Baron's a good man.
A great guy. And he wrestled Dr. X, who was Tom Stone under a mask, but Stone really knew how to pull that gimmick off, boy. He was great. Anyway, it was held at Wilson Park Stadium on the south side of Milwaukee. I did 700 paid. It was the biggest crowd for an independent show in Milwaukee at the time. And the reason why it was because the way that I promoted it. Nobody ran television commercials during Raw or anything. And I
Isn't
ran
that remarkable too,
television commercials on cable.
It's absolutely remarkable to me that promoters won't take advantage of a Monday or a Friday night and run a commercial during that time. To me,
well, you know what? Again, it comes down to expenses. In some markets, it's very expensive. In some markets, that 30-second spot can cost you $300. Depending upon what market that you're in. You know what I mean? So yeah. But back in the day, it was, I was paying $20, $30 for a 30-second spot during Raw. I was running commercials during all the wrestling shows, and then I followed that up. I did a show the following year. I brought in the Crusher, and I was told by just about everybody, you won't get him, he hates the business, and so on and so forth. And I said, well, he's worth a phone call. Let me see.
Absolutely.
So I have my good friend, Baron. I asked him to call Crusher for me, and he did. I hit it off with Crusher right away. And what do you know it? He agreed to appear. And it was his first appearance in 10 years, public appearance. In Milwaukee, at least. He did like the WCW Slamboree, I think, and some other things, but it was his first wrestling show. that he did. And actually, I was fortunate enough to book Crusher. And I say fortunate. I really do mean it. I admire the Crusher. Crusher, for anybody that's a big fan of the Crusher, he was that great of a guy. And I can't say enough about him. Very private. So an honor to call him my friend. And just a hell of a guy. Anyway, so I had Crusher, and when you know it, I think Frankie and I were partners at the time. We drew another house that was bigger than the last. And then from there, we did shows at a church gymnasium in Milwaukee that Tom Stone used to promote at in West Dallas. And we ran there consistently for about a year and a half until Carmine has a bright idea to hold the first ever barbed wire match in Milwaukee.
Oh, you started, didn't you, Carmine?
That was back in '94 or '95,
Jeez.
and it was innocent enough. We had a feud going, a program, and I kept it going because this is what I wanted it to lead to. Was between the Love Brothers, Eric Freedom and Charming Chad. They were the Love Brothers at the time, against the Wave Riders, Craig and Mike, who later became Hardcore Craig and Barfly Mike, but that's another story. It was a barbed wire match, and of course, you know, I've got some showmanship, and I couldn't help myself. I have a barbed wire match to promote. So what do? Well, I put on the poster that it's banned in 38 states and 4 continents.
There you go.
Well, needless to say, it got some attention. Front page of the Journal Sentinel. Right above it was Jackie Onassis's, Jackie O's obituary was right above it. We made the local news, and I thought it was some great publicity. Well, needless to say, the church didn't really need that publicity, and and I got kicked out of there. But they were at least nice about it, and they let me run my show. And we were packed to the rafters. I couldn't fit another person in the place. So it was cool. And you know something? There back in the day, was it hardcore wrestling? Not really. I mean, it wasn't a bloodbath. You know what? It was a barbed wire match. It was like, I think the first Clash of the Champions on TBS. I think Dusty and Tully opened it with a barbed wire match. You know, I mean, the guys were not taking bumps into the barbed wire like Onita. You know, they weren't tearing themselves up like that. But it was very, very entertaining, and, you know, the guys put together a hell of a match, and it was the end, the culmination of a feud. You know, I just thought it was, I thought it would get more attention than just an ordinary cage match, and it did.
To your recollection, was this the first barbed wire match of its kind in the Milwaukee area?
Yes, definitely. I think the first in Wisconsin.
So, I mean, yeah. It's going to beat a cage match easily, and the turnout was great. The church wasn't a huge fan of it, but at the end of the day, everything worked in your favor. It seems like it turned out to be a huge success for you.
Oh, yeah, I was proud of it, regardless.
And that's all that matters. So, I mean, you and Frankie worked together in the beginning, and at this point it was already called Mid-American Wrestling, or did you operate under a different name at that point?
No, I always promoted under Mid-American Wrestling.
When did you start promoting shows more regularly then? Because it sounds like you promoted shows here and there. When did it become more of a full-time gig for you? Actually,
it was. I promoted my first show. It was Flag Day. I remember that. 1993. And pretty much, you know what, every month after that until 2007.
How long did you and Frankie? How long were you guys partners for? Because I know now he runs his own promotion.
Correct. Frankie and I worked together as partners for, I'm going to have to say, about a year and a half.
Okay.
And it was just mutually agreed between us that, I'll use him as a wrestler and I can take care of the other stuff. And it was great, and we were pals and buddies, and I just, took the promotion end of it. And we did some shows together. Frankie, for example, will get a Sold show. I think we did high school in West Dallas. We did that together. I did some shows outside of Milwaukee. I would run a local show where like, for example, it was after this gymnasium in West Dallas where I did the barbed wire match. After I got kicked out of there, then I went to the Knights of Columbus, where Frankie runs right now.
Is that in Waukesha or is that in West Dallas?
That's in West Dallas. That's
okay.
In West Dallas on 1800 South 92nd Street. Beautiful West Dallas, Wisconsin. Anyway, I started running there. Also run some other little venues, here and there. It was, took some time to find the Knights of Columbus. Actually, one day a referee friend of mine, close personal friend, Scott DeMark, and I went out searching for buildings. We went everywhere. We spent morning to night trying to find a building that would suit us. And one of the last buildings that we found was there in West Dallas. I tried running Waukesha. I did some shows in Waukesha. I did some shows in northern suburbs. I think I did like Richfield. I did Kewaskum, some other towns. Nothing really caught on. I even tried south. We ran Racine, that area. It's kind of tough to get a following. We did all right business in Kenosha, but that was many years later when we ran the Brat Stop in Kenosha, because we were now getting fans from Chicago. They had an interest in our shows, and we had a great crew back then, which I'm sure you're going to be asking me about.
Oh yeah.
Primarily though Milwaukee. And primarily that same building, the Knights of Columbus. That's where I held most of my events. The first show I did there ever was with Mad Dog Vachon. He made an appearance, and
God bless Mad Dog.
It was one of the first shows, independent shows, that Mad Dog ever did. I again called my good friend Baron Von Raschke to contact Mad Dog, and he didn't even know what to charge for the appearance. So, because he hasn't done anything in years, and I thought, well, wait a minute, if Baron's a big draw, and if I've had Bockwinkel, and Nick was a great draw as well, Crusher, great draw. Well, God, Mad Dog's got to mean something. And sure enough, he did. I had to turn away people that night, the first night that we ran the Knights of Columbus. And it was also the first time that a table was broken in Milwaukee was that night with Craig and I believe Eric Freedom. It was just at the time that Sabu was doing stuff in Japan. I think, in ECW, sorry. And when he first debuted and getting his name out there, and he was breaking tables, so I had this great idea. I said, you know what, guys, we should break a table tonight. It was the first time. It gets me excited when I think about it. It really does, because I'm proud to say, and of course I don't remember everything. I really don't. But there are many things that I'm proud of for doing things for the first time, for being innovative. Anyways.
And that's the thing, too. We're talking, and when you first started promoting, and we talked in part one about the influx of promoters now just playing dress up and renting a ring and some 18-year-old kid, whatever it might be. But back when you were promoting, in Wisconsin anyway, it literally was, it was MAW, Mid-American Wrestling, and then potentially ACW, which was out of Green Bay. And if we were based in Wisconsin, you guys were the promotions to work for, specifically you. I knew when I broke into the business, it's either if I get to Minnesota, great, but it's hard to break that wall in Minnesota, but I really wanted to work for Carmine. What type of relationship did you have with Jason Jerry up in ACW or up in the Green Bay area? Was there a relationship there? Was it not great?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I have a great deal of respect for Jason Jerry. He came in the business much, much later. I mean, I think he came in maybe 98, maybe.
Okay.
I would think. And he was very successful up there. He did well. He did that place in Green Bay, the Watering Hole, I believe it was called. And he drew well up there. He did some credible shows, and we worked together. There were times through the years, for example, I get stuck, my sound guy can't show up, and I call up Jason and say, Jason, I need to use your sound system tomorrow. Carmine, no problem. I'll send it down with so-and-so. What do I owe you? Oh, don't worry about it. And we'd work together like that. I'm cool with Jason Jerry. I have a lot of respect for him. Later on, he worked with Ed Schumann. Of course, I did too with the NWA, with NWA Midwest.
And then on top of that, can you explain, because I've been trying to explain to people the difference between Wisconsin and Minnesota, and there was a huge difference. It seemed like if you were part of the Minnesota crew, you pretty much stuck in Minnesota, and you booked some Minnesota guys occasionally, but do you understand or can you explain why that was? Is there any reason that there was, I guess, a big wall between Minnesota and Wisconsin for the most part, as far as if you work in Minnesota, you pretty much stay there. If you work in Wisconsin, you kind of stay there, and eventually that eroded and broke down, but was it like that from the period you first started promoting?
Yeah. God, you know what? I think it goes back to the AWA days, personally. I mean, okay. There's shows held in Milwaukee. You had the crew here at the time with Jake the Milkman Milliman and Tom Rocky Stone, and then a slew of younger guys. And really, there was no reason to go up to Minnesota to wrestle. I mean, to make that trek. But then there were, in Minneapolis, the guys that work for Eddie Sharkey. These guys are getting consistent work, and I think it's just that we had our own factions, so to speak, I guess. And there were a few occasions where we crossed over and worked with each other. I don't think there's any real heat between us, between the two areas whatsoever, especially nowadays. But one thing's for sure, though. In my opinion, the greatest workers in the country have come out of the Midwest, from the area stretching from Minnesota to Chicago. You got to understand that the Chicago guys, the guys who were trained in Chicago, where did they wrestle primarily in the start of their careers? They wrestled in places like Milwaukee and Minneapolis and so on, and they got to work with these local guys that stressed psychology. Psychology was always so important and stressed in the Midwest, and I think that's where I know that's where I get that from. A way to do things, the proper way to do things, to do something that makes sense, make it mean something. All those things, that whole philosophy I got from working in the Midwest. And I would say that all the great stars that came out of the Midwest, I think that is one of the reasons why they became so good, was because of this Midwest mentality. On the East Coast, for example, I don't care, just pick a town. It really doesn't matter. I don't see a lot of guys trying to help each other. Guys running shows with the intent of teaching the wrestlers and molding them, and I didn't see a lot of that. You see, in other parts of the country, they just booked guys and put together a show. At least at the time, the Midwest was different. I firmly believe that. on another tangent too, we had such a great camaraderie, the guys. I don't really know if that exists as much as it did back then. But with that, the guys really tried to learn from each other, and they listened, and they wrestled guys that were at their level. And the guys were getting different, they were getting experience by wrestling for different promoters. They were wrestling different wrestlers that didn't only come from one school. And I think that really helped mold a lot of these guys, whether it be Ken Anderson, whether it be Punk, Cabana, Pearce, all of them. They got a chance to work with a variety of wrestlers and a variety of promoters. And in the Midwest, an emphasis on psychology of what to do when.
Yeah, and I'm important. I think that even extended it even to my state, and especially in Minnesota, when I became one of the best workers in Minnesota, there was a handful of us guys who would consider ourselves the best, the ones that went to the WWE and worked with them. Promoters would bring in names to work with us to make us better. But the first thing that I would do after I finished a match, I'd walk through the curtain, obviously, congratulate my opponent, ask him how it goes. But then I would initially walk right over to Eddie Sharkey, and I'd sit down with Sharkey, and I'd say, did you watch the match? And if he watched the match, I would pick his brain for a half an hour because all I wanted to do was keep getting better at what I did. And at the end of the day, psychology was the biggest thing that we try to do, or at least that I try to do, because you're right. I think that is a Midwest mentality, and the only way to get better is to work people that teach you new things and focus on psychology. And that's why it was great to hear you say that. And the question, you brought up a couple guys. You brought up Cabana. You brought up Punk. When did that relationship with the Steel Domain Wrestling Academy and the guys from Chicago, when did you start bringing those guys into Mid-American?
Well, I'll tell you what. The first time I had any type of contact with Scott Colton, with Colt Cabana, was that he sent me a backyard wrestling tape of him and his buddy and his I think it was his house, and pretty just wrestling around, and he said he wanted to be a wrestler. And at the time I was using Danny Dominion on my shows. So when Scott contacted me, as I remember it, I sent him to Dominion and to be trained with Danny and Ace. I think Scott remembers it differently, but anyway, I always had a relationship with guys out of Chicago. I always use guys here and there out of Chicago. There's nothing new. Cabana came along. Well, first of all, let's talk about Adam Pearce, because he was the first one. He came before Punk and Cabana. Pearce came out of a class with he was trained with by Sonny Rogers in Chicago, and I used him, and Adrian Lynch also came out of that class. Yes, and I gave them a tryout match, and I also ran a show down in it was near Lake Geneva, or it could have been Lake Geneva. Being that it was near the Illinois border, I used some guys from Chicago, especially so I could take a look at them or whatever. And I was impressed with Adam, and I continued to give Adam bookings, and immediately saw that he was a great athlete, and he had some size, and he had a good attitude. So I really thought a lot of him very, very early on. And in '98, I took him to Vienna, Austria for his first overseas tour. We did a 10-day tournament of Vienna, Austria. And I brought him with me, along with Skull Crusher and Hardcore Craig and Reverend Axel Future and who am I forgetting? Billy Joe Eaton. And that was a real motley crew. But anyway, yeah. But and Pearce was a young punk kid at the time. Gonna have to tell you that, and he knows it. But I'll tell you what he's become. There is nobody that has made me more proud than Adam Pearce. Pearce has become that bridge between the old school, and when I say old school, I'm kind of putting myself like how I believe the business should be, that bridge to the new school. And he is passing on the knowledge that he has to the younger generation. And believe me, there's not a lot of that going on.
There is not.
There isn't. No, that is very, very unfortunate. But Pearce will, if he's on a card, he'll watch a match, and then he'll sit down and sincerely give you criticism on how you did, what you could have done better, help you with whatever you need. That's Pearce. A great wrestling mind, and he's able to communicate. The thing is about guys like Pearce is that they might be great workers in the ring, but they can't communicate it. There's some that are great teachers, great workers, but not both. You see, Pearce is both. He can do both. He's done a lot of work lately with the WWE Performance Center. Mm-hmm. I think he'd be a great asset to that company. Any type of style that you want to see, he understands. He's an intellectual when it comes to this business, an intellectual. Mm-hmm. He's a student of the game, a student of psychology. Rather now, he's a professor of psychology. There's nobody with a better head on his shoulders than him, really.
Yeah, and I'll even tell you, you mentioned that he'll watch matches on a show. We were on that Jerry Lynn card, Jerry Lynn's last show in Minneapolis. I was working with Al Snow and Blue Meanie, and I looked up midway through the match, and I saw Adam sitting in the entryway, just sitting down, watching the match. Nobody else was watching that I could see, but he was in the entryway. Anybody in the crowd could have seen him, but I know he was watching the match. And after the match, I walked up to him. I said, hey, I saw you sitting there. What'd you think? And we sat down for 20, 25 minutes, and he walked, because Adam's a man I looked up to. I worked a couple of shows beforehand, and he walked me through what I did well, what I could work on. And that meant a lot to me, because the man knows how to wrestle. He knows how to talk on a mic, and I cut a promo during that match. And it meant the world to me that he didn't have to. He could have went back there and sat around and talked to, Sean Waltman and talked to every other name that was on that card. But he sat there, took the time to watch a young kid, me, in a match with two other guys, and gave me some advice afterwards. And it meant the entire world to me. And you're right. He is.
Let me tell you where he gets that from. He gets that from because he saw old timers when he was first starting out watching his matches. And for example, I had Nick Bockwinkel on some shows, and I just adore Nick Bockwinkel. He's one of my idols. As far as I'm concerned, one of the greatest ever lived, the greatest champion, a true gentleman. Nick is great. And Nick would watch the matches. Nick just likes to watch wrestling. He'll admit it, and he gets up and he, in the locker room, and he's peeking through the door. And I remember him watching Adam's match. Adam worked Billy Joe Eaton that night. I remember the match. And I asked Nick, I said, Nick, any type of advice you give these kids, I really would appreciate it. Say no more to Nick. Nichols, the old saying about Nick is that if you ask him what time it is, he'll tell you how to make a watch. That's the old Nick Bockwinkel line. And he did. And I think that's where he gets it from. There were old timers that would help out. And you see, most of them at least, they liked the idea that somebody was asking for their opinion, that some young wrestler respected them enough and knew who they were to ask for an opinion. And the ones that didn't, well, they lost out,
Yeah, exactly.
But definitely, I think Adam really benefited from that. Yeah, but enough about Adam Pearce, because if I start comparing Nick Bockwinkel to Adam, then we're in real trouble.
Well, I mean, obviously, Adam was one great man. You still associate with Adam today, and Adam, you guys are highly involved in the California Alley Club, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But some other names that you booked: Ken Anderson came out of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Austin Aries, Rashi Brown, Colt Cabana, and obviously CM Punk. So let's go back to Scotty Colt. He sent you the tape from his backyard, and I know when I worked for you. I worked for you one time, and it was a bar, and this is when smoking was still allowed in Wisconsin, and it was one of the toughest matches I ever had because I couldn't breathe. It was totally full of smoke, and it was a tag match, but after the match, Scott sat down with me too, and I asked him for his advice, and he gave me advice and helped me out, gave me his phone number. And Scott's very similar to Adam. They had a great feud on the indie scenes a couple of years ago. What can you say about Colt Cabana and his job working for you?
Well, first of all, he's a genius. It's true. I'm serious. Pearce is as well. These guys are, truly a genius. There's nobody like Cabana. Cabana is, look at what he's done with himself. He can market himself like no other wrestler, independent wrestler in the country. He pulls down a very good income. By, of course, he's always getting booked, and he's always selling his gimmicks, whatever he's got going on. He knows how to market himself. He's got his internet shows that he does.
It's fantastic.
He's just, really he's just brilliant. And talk about an untapped talent, God, you could center a whole promotion around Cabana. He is entertaining, and he knows the business better than anybody. What's wrong? You just got me thinking. I think I have to call Scott up and start doing some business with him.
There you go.
The guy is really, truly brilliant. Truly brilliant. I think he's just fantastic. Really, I can't say enough about him.
Your show was the first show I worked with him, and I've worked a bunch of shows with him afterwards. And yeah, he legitimately loves what he does, and he will give back to anybody who asks for his advice. But he has fun while he's out there. And
he became such a great wrestler that I would compare other wrestlers to him. The reason why is because he's so ingenious in the ring. I remember when I saw. I was using Silas Young for a while. Mm-hmm. He actually was a regular, and it came a time where I said, you know what? He's becoming the new Cabana. He's becoming the new Cabana. I think that in the Midwest, guys like Cabana, guys like Pearce, guys like CM Punk, guys like Ken Anderson, these guys raise the bar, and for independent wrestling. They did a lot for independent wrestling, these guys. I think that's kind of forgotten, Well, go ahead. I'll let you. You're conducting the interview, right?
No, I'm telling you. I'm grateful for those guys because they came from this area, and I've had to hear about Ken Anderson and Austin Aries and CM Punk since the day I got into the business, and I could only imagine being that good. So I worked in the last 5 years. I worked really, really hard because I wanted to say I want to get to that level. And yeah, I don't have a contract with WWE. I don't have a contract with any of the big promotions, but I mean those were the driving points for me because they left such a legacy on our territory, quote unquote, that I wanted to try to at least, I guess, give to this territory as much as they did. And you mentioned Silas Young, great talent, Ring of Honor, unfortunately just recently broke his leg. But what about Ken Anderson then? I mean, he was, Mike Mercury trained him out of Green Bay. He was very helpful to me on a lot of the ACW shows I was on. He worked with you. What did you see like in Ken's eyes? Because he was supposed to be the next man in WWE. They were supposed to tie the rocket ship to him and let him go, and unfortunately it didn't work out there. But at what point did you see something in Ken that you knew he would be a big name in the business?
I met him before a WWE show in Milwaukee I was with Andy Seelan, who was known at the time as Dino Bambino. By the way, very proud that I came up with that name, Dino Bambino. I think it's a great babyface name. Yes. Anyway, and I made him a Dago. So anyway, he brought this young kid to the bar, Ken Anderson, who wanted to be a wrestler, and we lived in Green Bay. And Andy said that he was going to get him hooked up with Mercury, and he's just taking him around to meet people and so on. And I thought he was a nice kid. And Kenny, I'll tell you what a great talent. On the Indies, when I ran wrestling shows, Kenny was the one guy that really had that star quality. I used to say to him all the time, I said, brother, you have that intangible that cannot be taught. You have to be born with it. You have that quality, that quality. He also had a great humility. Kenny had a great humility too, super nice, no ego, really wanting to learn. I personally, unfortunately, we've taken different paths in life, Kenny and I. We were fairly close, but I unfortunately haven't spoken to him it's probably been about 7 years. But Kenny, as far as I'm concerned, when I ran wrestling shows, he was great, a great star, showed a lot of promise. He proved it. I was so proud of him with what he was able to do. I remember him calling me when he got his first shot on TV, and it was just great. I felt great pride in it. That a wrestler that worked for me was actually able to get a shot like that. That happened a few times in my career as a promoter. That guys succeeded, and I felt to myself, when they found success, boy, I found success as well. If they succeeded, I succeeded as well.
Yeah, and another name I'm going to bring up here, we hear a lot about in professional wrestling, and specifically if we talk about the WWE, there is the police chief or the lawmaker in WWE is known as The Undertaker. I always felt in Mid-American Wrestling, that man for Mid-American Wrestling was the Skull Crusher. I mentioned him earlier on. He's the man I was scared of the most. I didn't want to piss him off, and I got along with him well when I was there with you. And he taught me just a bunch. He's just a great person. Where, I guess, the relationship with you and Skull Crusher, and I know he had some bad breaks with injuries. Otherwise, he could have been a big name, I think, in New York. Explain a little bit with Skull Crusher and the relationship with him.
Did you get chopped by the Skull Crusher? Do I remember that right?
You booked my ass against Jason Dukes, and for 12 straight minutes, he chopped me for 12 straight minutes while Rashi watched from and I didn't say a word about it because I knew that they kept telling me beforehand, just take it, brother. All right, I'll take it. For 12 straight minutes, I took, I don't know how many chops against the chest, but I never once complained about it because I knew it was my orientation to working for you. And I think after that's when the Skull Crusher and I sat down and had a conversation for a while, and it went great. And I guess I'm maybe thankful that Dukes gave him to me instead of Rashi, because I'm not really sure how that would have went. But the man was great. He was a role model to me, and I didn't spend a ton of time in Milwaukee working for you, but when I did, he was a man I consistently looked up to and asked for advice. What did Skull Crusher mean for you, for Mid-American Wrestling, and for wrestling in general here in Wisconsin and the Midwest?
Well, one of my best friends, by far. Rashi and I have always been really close and good buddies. Another great talent. He has a great mind for the business and a great attitude towards the business. He believes the same way that I do, that wrestling should be presented in a believable fashion. He has his old school beliefs just like I do. I guess that's the best way to put it. Just a great guy. and you might have been scared of him in the locker room, and which is good because you should be, and you should have been.
Right.
He's a hell of a nice guy. Not a bully. He's the actual opposite of a bully in real life. Rashi has a heart of gold. He'll stand up and defend you, defend his friends. He is a very, very loyal person. I love him to death. What else? What else can I heard about it? I heard that he's contemplating a comeback.
Yeah, I saw that too, and I'm not sure. I know he had some issues with, I think, neck problems, right? So I'm not sure if I think they'll.
He said he's been in motorcycle accidents. He just won't give up. It's not his time to retire, I guess. I'm going to be coming to Milwaukee on Friday, December the 19th. I'll be there for ICW for Dysfunction show in Milwaukee, a benefit show for Silas Young, as you mentioned earlier. Silas was injured and not able to wrestle, nor be able to, work his regular job. So hope some additional fans come out and help this worthy cause. Silas Young is a great guy. I never got the chance to really get to know him that closely. He wrestled for me for a few years, but I'm much better friends with Kurt Krieger, Dysfunction, than I am with Silas. But a hell of a guy, a fellow brother, and I understand there's going to be a lot of guys coming out that night to help out with this cause.
Right.
So I hope that you're one of them.
Yeah, like I said, if I'm still around here in the area, I'm going to be there. I know there was a show I was on early in my career, and Silas's opponent didn't show up or couldn't make it, and he got to handpick whoever he wanted to work that night, and he picked me, and that meant a lot to me. And we had a really good match. So I will definitely, if I'm in Milwaukee still at that point, which I'm assuming I probably will be, I will be there, and we'll toast back a couple for Silas for sure. So let me just fast forward here to, I have two more names on my list, and one is, there's a famous ladder match in Mid-American Wrestling history that involved Austin Aries. And I know Dan from Minnesota days, and obviously he went on to become the TNA World Heavyweight Champion. What's your thoughts on Austin Aries, what he's accomplished in wrestling, where he came from, and what the future, I guess, holds, in your opinion, for Austin Aries?
Wow, what a talent, huh?
Yeah, he's great.
What a wrestler. Another guy. Look at all these guys that we're talking about. I mean that you're bringing up here. Pearce, Cabana. Wow. What intelligent guys. What great wrestlers. Austin Aries, a great technician in the ring. The guy is mind-blowing. He's like on the level of being like the new age Dynamite Kid. Everything he does means something. He's not just doing spots just to do them. They mean something. He's a great teacher as well. He's passing on his knowledge. I have all the respect in the world for the guy. Hell of a guy. Austin Aries has really, I think, can accomplish anything he wants in the business, So
yeah, he's
fantastic. Hopefully he'll be there on the 19th. I hope.
That would be awesome. I know he comes back to Milwaukee quite a bit. And I guess last name, if you haven't guessed it, you booked him against Cabana, and he's been booked quite a bit in Mid-American Wrestling. The biggest name or on the list is CM Punk. When you worked with him or booked him at Mid-American, I never had a chance to work a show with him, because when I started working, it was probably a year and a half after he already been in Ring of Honor and started working those circuits. How was he for you when you booked him for your shows? Well,
him and Cabana were on the same level. I think they still are, as far as I'm concerned. These guys were young, hungry guys. I remember I ran a show in Wind Lake, Wisconsin, I think it was. And these guys wrestled the night before in Philadelphia and made the drive from Philadelphia to Wind Lake, Wisconsin. They drove straight right after the show to make my show. I was blown away by that. Now I wasn't the only one, of course. They did that with everybody. They wanted to take as many bookings as possible in as many different places as possible. They wanted to travel. They knew the value of traveling, whether it was Minneapolis or the wrestling Cleveland or Pittsburgh or New York or Philly. As long as it was, if they could drive there, they were going, and there was no stopping them. I think that Punk always knew that he would be a star. I believe that. I remember telling him that I thought he had a quality like Roddy Piper. He had that a bit of arrogance, but then also funny, snarky, and I remember telling him that, and then he showed up the next show wearing a Hot Rod t-shirt. I'd send him tapes. I remember making tapes for him of old matches of some of my favorite stuff, like old Cowboy Bob Orton and Adrian Adonis and Morocco and Bockwinkel, just guys that I really like to watch. Buddy Rose, guys like that, Punk was he was different. I haven't spoken to him in years. He's I guess the only way to sum it up, and I think he'd be proud of me saying this, he's a prick. He's not the nicest guy in the world and doesn't want to be known as one.
Right.
He lives his life to his rules. He's not a bad guy, but he has a direction in life. He knows what he's going to do. He knew from day one what he wanted to accomplish in the business, and he did it. He made so much money. It's unfathomable. I mean, it's crazy for me to think that the kid that used to wrestle for me for $60 owns like a 4-block radius in Chicago. It's mind blowing. But good for him. He got out because he had enough. It's an unhappy work environment working for WWE. It's not fun. These guys don't have fun. The guys who do, I guess, they must be the lucky ones, because I hear about guys complaining. I hear about guys that, the rigorous schedule. Everything, the politics, on and on and on. He just decided he had enough, and see you later. And he might one day decide to come back to the business, I'm sure. I'm sure he's going to be, one day he'll come back and do something. I doubt if he'll get in the ring, but he'll do something one day. He'll start making appearances. He'll do something one day. I shouldn't speak for him, but, but I'm not. I'm just giving my opinion. But I think he will, It's in our blood. We can't help it. He loves the wrestling business. I got out of the wrestling business for years. I was out. I thought to myself, what? I don't need this crap anymore. I've had enough of it. Hell with it. It didn't make me happy anymore. Well, it didn't make me happy anymore, so I gave it up. Well, you always bounce back to it, and I think that goes for just about everybody. Look at the Warrior. For God's sake, he signed off on the business. He came back. There have been so many guys in the history of wrestling. Nobody ever truly retires.
Right.
There have been I can't even think of any right now that have truly just bang retired. You never heard from them again. Probably Dr. D. David Schultz. But if you want to pay him what he wants for a personal appearance, he'll be there. But he's not cheap. He's not working for $500. But I mean, so pretty much money talks, and it'll probably be the same situation with Punk one day.
That was my question for you too. I was going to ask you, do you think he'll come back to WWE? I think there's still money to be made there for him, especially, but I know he doesn't need it. But the fan in you, do you hope he comes back to WWE or a wrestling organization in general?
Well, I don't really care that much, but I'll say this. Just like I said, you wouldn't think a lot of guys would go back to work for Vince. For a long time, it was thought Hogan will never work for Vince again. Bullshit. And the same thing they said about Slaughter. They said the same thing about so many guys. It's about the payday, but then it's also about the ego, and it's all about the love of the business. It's in our blood. So I would say that one day you're probably going to see him. I doubt if he'll be in the ring. I don't know. He takes a lot of. He works very, very hard. Punk does. I don't think he would ever want anybody to see him in the ring and be rusty. I mean, he prides himself on being a great performer. But he's a prick. I think maybe that should be a CM prick T-shirts maybe. but that's okay. I'll tell you what. Some of my best friends have been has been pricks, and that's okay. On the other hand, another super highly intelligent guy when it comes to the business. He found a way to get over when the writers didn't know what the hell to do with him, when Triple H was against him, when all these things were against him. He found a way to get over, and he found a way to make money, and he achieved his goal, and he wasn't going to bow down to anything. He knows the way that he wants to be treated, and if he's not going to be treated that way, he's going to walk away. And that's what he did. I mean, he's not a mark. He's in this business to make money, but he wants it on his terms, which I have a lot of respect for. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't know.
And I've heard the prick stories. I never actually met him personally until I went down to Des Moines to be an extra and to do my little thing in the ring. And he was very cordial to us when we were there, very preoccupied it seemed like. And then shortly after, obviously, everything went down.
Yeah, whatever. There are a lot of guys. You know what? It's funny when you do interviews, like when you hear all these shoot interviews, they mention names. Nobody ever says anything negative. There are a lot of jerk-offs in this business. There are a lot of bad people, too, in this business, but you don't hear about it. I think that your everyday fan has this illusion that the wrestling business is just a bunch of, happy-go-lucky guys, no, there's some scumbags, some legendary scumbags in the business, but anyway. That's going to be a shoot interview that people are going to have to pay for. You know what I mean?
I would. There's plenty I've met, and I'm sure you have a ton.
I've been careful to tone it down with you, Ryan.
Hey, that's fine. I like it when when the realism comes up. But you're not kidding, man. There are a ton of scumbags that I've met in this business, and I'm sure that the plethora of scumbags that you
nobody talks about them though, and they don't talk about a lot of the good guys. I got some favorite people. You mentioned earlier. God, I love Eddie Sharkey. Eddie Sharkey, what a great guy. What a great character. I met him years ago, became friends with him, and then to know that, keeping in mind that he trained the Road Warriors, trained Backlund, trained Nikita, trained Jesse. Wow. And then after meeting the guy, what a character. I remember him coming back to the locker room at First Avenue. I did a show there, and he comes back and he says, "Oh, what a great match! You guys had a great. Oh, what a great match you guys had! What a great match you guys had!"
He didn't watch a damn thing, did he?
And I went up to him and I Did you really watch it? No, I didn't watch it. I didn't watch it.
That's classic Sharky. Didn't watch it.
One time I called him out. He was drinking his whiskey. He was sitting up in the balcony, and I called him. There was a heel manager, and I called him out of the balcony. You old drunken, washed up bum, you know, and I forced him to come to the ring, you know, to come down, and just because I wanted to take one of an Eddie Sharkey uppercut, you know. Mm-hmm. So, but what a guy, what a good friend as well, and you know, those are guys that I think history needs to tell the story about. I mean, they're guys like that. They're guys like, let me see here. How about Kamala? Have you ever met Kamala?
I never actually met him personally.
James, what a great guy. Always has been a great guy. He has a book coming out. And I'm going to tell you, this is a book that everybody's going to want to buy. He's not pulling any punches. He's talking about how Undertaker made $1 million for the match at Wembley Stadium, or something to that effect, and Kamala got $10,000. I mean, you know, so he's not going to pull any punches. It's going to be a really good book. It's one that I definitely want to read, and actually I contributed some photos to it as well, because we were on tour in Europe together. I managed them, Spain, Austria, Portugal, Norway. We got around. And I did a bunch of indie shows here in the States for them too. What a great guy. What a great guy. But, yeah, there are a lot of bad guys in this business, but, you know, a lot of good guys too. But one thing that's funny, you don't hear anything bad. You know, you don't even hear, hey, you know something, if somebody's a prick, I'll tell you.
Right.
You know, and I've probably been called that too at one time or another in my life, you know, which is fine. But I think you got to call them like you see them, you know, and I think it's about time that people take responsibility for what they do. I think that's important. I think you don't see enough of that in the wrestling business. Take responsibility for the stuff that you say and for the things that you do, you know, so.
Absolutely. I would agree with you 110% on that for sure. I'm going to do something here. I'm going to bring it current. I have a question on a man that's never worked for you, but I want to know your thoughts because I think you're a genius in the business. And
come on.
Okay. I mean, there might be some that disagree with me, but I think you're fantastic. So when I mention this name, the internet community obviously is up in arms about this character, but he's the most popular character in professional wrestling. He's the most popular wrestler, John Cena. And the only reason I bring this up is because I want to keep it current for some of my new age wrestlers. What is it do you think about him that makes him so polarizing, that he's been able to be as popular as he has been for 10 years, and he's still there? Because you typically don't see this very often with big runs, but he's still there. Is there anything that you can put your finger on as why he's been able to maintain this for as long as he has?
Yeah, he's able to connect with the fans. It's really just that simple. He's able to connect. I would compare him to like Bruno Sammartino. I mean, Bruno was a similar style worker in a sense that he was a top babyface and the big strong babyface, you know, as opposed to like Harley Race, who was more of a wrestler's wrestler. Bruno was that type of strong Superman babyface. I think you can say the same about Cena. He's just a modern version of that. You know, he emulates a superhero in so many ways, which makes him, and through marketing, the great marketing of WWE, he becomes just that, a superhero. He probably sells as many T-shirts as Superman does.
I bet. Absolutely.
You have to admire the guy. You know, he's a hard worker. Everything I've heard about him has always been very positive. That he's humble. He's got a huge heart. He does a lot of work with Make-A-Wish and appearances like weekly with Make-A-Wish, and does a tremendous amount of charity work. He's a good human being, and he has humility, and he's a hard worker, so that makes him a great employee. So he was given the shot, and he earned it. He earned every damn thing that he's got. I'm saying this. I've never even met him before, but he's earned everything that he's got. And what I mean by that is that he's able to provide for his family, and they can have a great life, and he can have a great life. And he's made enough money; he can retire tomorrow.
Easily.
But he continues to do it. Why? Because he feels it's not time yet. He loves what he does. And, if John Cena went off of TV, how many kids would then ask to see him? How successful would his charity work be if he wasn't on television anymore, if he wasn't John Cena, the WWE superstar? So, he's a good guy, Well, that was good. That was a good segue. We went from talking about CM Punk, who's also a good person too. I want to, by the way, say that he is. He just, sometimes he can be a jerk. That's all. But he's a good person. And he's contributed a lot to the business. He truly has. Yeah.
And let's use that the segue into my final question and bring everything full circle from part one to part two. We're speaking about good people. We're speaking about pricks. We're speaking about jerks. Let's go back to Paul Heyman and just the managing situation. Who, if you had a Mount Rushmore of managers, Carmine, who's the four faces on your Mount Rushmore for managers in professional wrestling?
Wow, that's quite the question. I don't think anybody cuts a promo better than Paul Heyman. Absolutely nobody has that stream of consciousness like he does. The guy is brilliant. He should have been on TV consistently for the past 20 years. He really should have been. He's fantastic. Absolutely great. My favorites, just personally, I love Albano. I love him as a character. Had the great chance, to meet him, hang out with him. I was actually on his dais of the Captain Lou Albano roast in New Rochelle, New York. I love the guy. Just a great character. Freddie Blassie. Great character. In fact, I don't know if you know, but interesting fact is one of my jackets, I got a blue shimmer cloth jacket. That was given to me by Freddie.
Awesome.
I can prove it because he autographed the inside of the jacket. And you know what? His wife made that jacket for him, God knows how long ago. And the thing is still in one piece. It's gone everywhere. It's gone to Europe 14 times. So, Freddie, fantastic. What we're lacking nowadays are these real-life characters, like the Albanos, the Blassies, and like Dick Murdoch, and these guys, the real-life characters are actually more interesting and more entertaining than what you would see of them on TV. But
right.
Manager-wise, I guess back to your original question, I don't know. I like Bobby Heenan. Bobby's great, brilliant, fantastic, very consistent throughout his whole career. A great worker too. Back in the day, I remember meeting him for the first time, and I was really nervous. I really was, because Bobby has the reputation of not being the nicest guy. He has a reputation of being a prick as well. And he was so cordial with me. I don't know. I think it was because maybe I kind of slid in a couple names, name dropped a little bit. But he was. Sometimes you got to do that. You got to do that sometimes. You really do. He was great. He was great. I had the opportunity to work with him a couple times. We did some stuff, like in-ring interview kind of things on Ian Rotten's show, and I don't know, outside of Chicago somewhere. I did something with Bobby. Bobby appeared. Remember, I said earlier, I'm proud of like being the first one to do something. Well, I brought in Bobby Heenan, and I was the first independent wrestling show that he did after he left WCW. I also had Harley Race in his well, I wouldn't say first indie show because he was running his own shows in Missouri, but outside of his Missouri shows, my show was the first one that he appeared on as well. So I think about those things sometimes, and I don't know. It's nice to have memories like that.
Absolutely, man.
And I'm proud that one thing that I always believed in when I promoted wrestling and is to bring in the legends, to honor them, have them do autographs, whatever. I think there still is a market for it. I think, like we talked about earlier with the WWE Network, people are becoming more educated, more wrestling savvy. They're interested in the history. I think if Lou Thez was alive today, you could probably get $100 an autograph. That's the Babe Ruth, right? Of wrestling. I mean, isn't that the perception? I mean, there are not many left. Sadly, there aren't. I think that the history of the business needs to be preserved as much as possible, respected. Hopefully, I'm going to return to the business and start promoting once again in Oklahoma City. And when I do, there's many legends I want to bring out. I would love to have Danny Hodge, Jerry Briscoe, Bill Watts, Kevin Von Erich. There's so many guys from this that made a name for themselves in this part of the country that were that were local icons, in the wrestling business. I think that I would like to see the wrestling business do more of that. I think that there's a market for it, don't you?
I do, and I had this conversation with some other promoters. I think there is to an extent, but at the same time, I think when you bring them in as a promoter, you want to make sure that they can draw for you as well.
There's certain guys that will not draw. There's certain legends that will not draw. I mean, don't get me wrong. I will say this: in the Midwest, I don't see how you can go wrong with booking Baron von Raschke. I mean, as long as he hasn't appeared in the past year. I mean, everybody wants to see the Claw in Milwaukee, in Minnesota as well, and what a great, easy guy to deal with, But I actually booked him for an appearance, about a year and a half ago in South Padre Island, Texas. I had Baron von Raschke.
Bet you enjoyed that, though. Get out of Minnesota for a little bit.
He drove. Bonnie and him drove down.
Doesn't surprise me.
He was paid. He was paid well. But we had a blast with him. And the reason why we did it because there are a lot of winter Texans, retirees from Minnesota, Chicago that come down to South Padre Island, Texas for the winter. So we had the idea to let's bring Baron down there, and then the folks will know who he is. And they did. We had a nice crowd for him. It was really cool, but kind of surreal to hear Baron von Raschke in South Texas, But no, what a great guy. See, you know what you're doing? You're bringing up a lot of names of guys that I miss talking to. So now when we conclude this radio show, I'm going to be making up a list of guys that I want to call.
Make a list, make a call, get into Oklahoma City. Obviously you mentioned you're going to start hopefully running again. So I wish you absolutely nothing but the best, man. It's going to be.
Thank you, brother.
It'll be exciting for it. And we'll wrap this up. And if you're up here on the 19th of December, hopefully I'm still in the area. And if I am, we will definitely share a drink and we will touch base and touch on some old times, man. But this has been fun.
I want to tell you that I have been asked before to do podcasts. I have never accepted an invitation. I don't know, felt that it wouldn't benefit me, and I didn't think anybody really would want to listen. So I declined. But when you contacted me, man, you were a great kid with a great passion for the business, and you always had such great respect. And, I did this for you. And thank you very much, Ryan, and thank you for keeping me in your thoughts for so many years.
Oh, always,
I mean,
man.
that. You're a great guy.
I'm still a young kid. I still have passion for this business, and I'll love it till the day I die. It's the greatest thing ever made. And having you come on means the world to me. And it is a history lesson for me, and I appreciate you spending the last, couple hours with me, man. So thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully we'll see you back on the 19th here, December.
Okay, my man. Thank you very much. I hope we have some listeners.
Oh, we will. We will. We'll get them done. All right. Thanks a lot, Carmine. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to The Pencil, the professional wrestling podcast online. Follow us on Twitter at Pencil Podcast or check us out online at pencilpodcast.com. You can listen to our show every Tuesday on iTunes, PodBean, Stitcher, and YouTube. Our show features guests from the WWE, TNA, the independent wrestling scene, and legends of wrestling past. Check it out today.